All right, so welcome to another Striper Season Update brought to you by West Marine. We are here in the last days of July. We're kind of hitting that midsummer lull, late summer lull in the striper fishing. Here around Cape Cod, striper fishing's been a little bit off. There's been some fishing for the boats. Further north of the Cape, fishing's been pretty good. There's been some good fish around Boston Harbor and further north up into Maine. You go south, Block Island is fishing well, but a lot of the guys right now are focused on tuna. They're focused on looking for the bonito to start showing up. So we're kind of at, I would call it the intermission for the striper season. Once you get into August, things start picking right back up again. And, right now would be a good time if you're going to go fishing this weekend, focus on some other species. You can get a ride to the offshore grounds. That would be my top pick. But I've just gotten back. I haven't done any striper fishing in 2 weeks because I've been away. First, I was on family vacation in Ocean City, New Jersey. Then we went down to ICAST in Orlando, Florida, looking at all the latest and greatest gear coming out next year for fishermen. And while I was away, I got a few texts and a few messages about some videos of the happenings at the Cape Cod Canal. So 2 weeks ago, Cape Cod fishing, the canal fishing really kind of blew open a little bit on the new moon. Andrew, I know you, I've got Andrew Burke with me. He was there. He was one of the people who delighted in sharing his canal successes with me while I was away, 2 states away. So how was it?
It was, for me personally, it was more of a bridesmaid versus bride situation. I witnessed a lot of great fishing. I hoped to fish momentarily, but I gave it a few days and I don't know, just didn't work out in my favor. But the fishing itself was really good. A lot of top water feeds. This was probably 10 or so days ago now. But yeah, it really just popped off seemingly out of nowhere. It seemed like the tinkle mackerel rolled in and all of a sudden the fishing was lights out pretty much up and down the canal. Guys coming from the west end were saying the west was good earlier, and I happened to be in the east end, and the east was also good. So it seemed like the whole canal lit up with the presence of the Tinker Max.
Yeah, I was there right before it popped off. So I left for Ocean City on July 10th. I left on a Sunday. I think that might have been July 10th or July 11th. I was there the day before and saw plenty of bait, and there were only a few fish, and you could just tell, like, the table was set, things were going to happen. You had the good tides, and it was like as soon as my tires hit 195 south, that's when the stripers knew it was time to bombard the bait in the inside the canal. But it wasn't all good. It's all good feelings and happy fishermen at the canal. There were a couple videos floating around of, one was some altercation between a couple of fishermen, and where it was, people talked about it. Before I saw the video, people said there's a guy pulled a knife on another guy at the canal. Andrew, is that what you were pretty much hearing?
I heard about it before I actually saw the video. To me, it almost looked like a pair of pliers. He definitely pulled something out, though.
When I saw the video, finally, it was attached by a leash to his belt, and the guy was, kind of jabbing at the other. I don't know what the nature of it was. Somebody was in his spot. He crossed the line. Who knows? But anyhow, this guy felt the need to defend himself with whatever he had handy, which looks like it was a pair of pliers. So we thought that this week, maybe we'd talk a little bit about if you're going to fish the canal, maybe surviving the Cape Cod Canal. In case somebody comes at you with some pliers, you can avoid a situation like that. But Andrew, how long have you been fishing the canal?
I started fishing the canal a couple years ago, so I think about 4 years I've been fishing the canal heavily. And I mean, by canal rat standards, that's not very long at all, but long enough to see some interesting things and definitely pick up on the do's and don'ts of canal fishing and canal etiquette.
Yeah, it's definitely, the canal it's the most unique striper fishery I think we have here in the Northeast. There is nowhere else quite like it. Obviously, it's all man-made. It was dug in the early part of the 1900s. 1913, I think, is when they started digging it. A guy by the name of Augustus Belmont had this idea. He thought he was going to help ships avoid going around the treacherous waters of the Cape, let them cut through kind of the isthmus of Cape Cod right there, and safer passage. He was going to charge them tolls. Ended up being a disaster early on. The boats weren't making it. They were crashing. It was too narrow. Eventually, the Army Corps of Engineers took it over, dredged it, widened it, and turned it into the canal you see today. And, the second they connected Cape Cod Bay and Buzzards Bay, obviously those waters started to mix. It is I believe it's the largest ocean level canal that there is, without, it doesn't have any locks or anything. The Panama Canal, everybody knows about that one that has locks. there's no locks in the Cape Cod Canal. The land cut itself is 7 miles long. So having that connection, you've got the mixing of Cape Cod Bay, very cold water, big tides, with Buzzards Bay, warmer water, smaller tides, and striped bass didn't take them long to figure out that was a shortcut for them to go through the canal and that the bait would get trapped in there. I mean, people have seen all kinds of crazy things in the canal. Andrew, over your years of fishing, what's the strangest thing you've seen come cruising through?
Probably, sunfish. I mean, you can see those all the time in Cape Cod Bay, but seeing such a large animal within the confines of, a couple hundred yards across the canal, it's pretty crazy. And I'm sure people out there with or without cameras have seen a lot crazier things. But for me, sunfish.
Yeah, they're always pretty wild to see. You see that big fin flopping over. First time you see it, you think almost that's a shark. There's some guys, we saw that video that went around years ago where the guys thought it was a baby whale and all sorts of other things. That's always very cool. I've seen leatherback turtles in there around the same. All the weird stuff you see in the canal tends to be toward the end of the summer, late August, September through October. It's when you have the warm waters. A lot of stuff is starting to migrate. I've seen leatherbacks in there. I've never seen a big shark in the canal. I know plenty of guys have. I know guys who have seen white sharks in there. I've seen pilot whales in the canal. Years ago, I saw a pilot whale in there. And giant bluefin tuna is probably the coolest thing I've ever seen in the canal. And that's a lot of people have seen that. That's another like fall occurrence. Is they'll come in, the giants pile into Cape Cod Bay, and then they dip into the canal to eat a bluefish or stripers, and you'll just see them. There's no mistaking it.
I think the late summer, kind of early fall peak water temperatures also brought in that sailfish. What was that, in 2013?
So yeah, that sailfish, the guy saw it finning, kind of throwing some water toward the big dolphins there at Murderer's Row in the east end of the canal. They threw a storm shad at it, or a swim shad, and remarkably, the fish ate it. They landed it, and that was definitely the craziest catch I've ever heard of in the canal. I've heard of people getting school bluefin in there too, but the sailfish, that's something you would not expect to see up here, especially close to shore.
There was video of it, but unfortunately, the video kind of preceded the age of iPhones being good video cameras, so the footage is grainy. But
we've got it on the site. We can link to it in the description here. We've got you could. It's really grainy. You see the fish, but you can see the sailfish jumping. Like, it's very clear. It's the canal, and that's a billfish. Well, you get the idea. It's not HD, but it does the trick. But yeah, so all kinds of weird stuff show up in the canal, but obviously the thing that everybody wants to see, the most popular canal visitor is the striped bass. And the canal is not a secret, has never been a secret spot. As long as there's been water flowing through it, people have been trying to fish it. Stan Gibbs, the famous plug builder, he tested his lures out in the Cape Cod Canal after World War II. He did a lot of his lure designs today. You see the pencil popper, Gibbs casting swimmer, which, more widely known as the bottle plug. The canal was his testing grounds for it, so people have been fishing there since 1940s, 1930s. But it has been the last maybe 5 or 6 years, the canal's really kind of become the spot where everybody goes. And it's, the crowds have become almost more legendary than the fishing has been over the last few years.
Going back to strange creatures that inhabit the canal, I think far and away the strangest creatures are the fishermen usually.
Without a doubt. So, Andrew, you came to the canal. I mean, you're a young guy. You're 12, 15 years younger than me. So you coming to the canal later, like, it's always been kind of a crowded situation for you. That's always been how it is.
The year I actually got into it is kind of like the famous recent canal year, which was 2017. And I was doing pretty well on the beaches that really early that spring, like almost unseasonably early. And I kind of got on like a big fish kick early in the spring, and then some of those beaches that I fished dried up, and I heard it was good at the canal, so I decided to see what it was all about. And me and a couple other 1,000 people had the same idea, I guess.
That 2017 year, that blitz started in mid-July, and it was reliable. Every moon, you would have big blitzes for 4 or 5 days, and it would last long enough that, I mean, you saw people there, and they were ripping tags off rods that they had just bought because they heard about this fishing in the Cape Cod Canal, and they were going to go try it out. I mean, word had spread so far and so wide that everybody went there to get a piece of that action. I mean, it was there was a blitz in late August that seemed to go for, man, 6 days straight, where you were there for all hours of the night, like all hours of the day and night. I would fish it up until I had to go to work at 8 o'clock, get out of work, and there would still be fish going. I mean, I've never seen I would put that blitz that week in August up against any of the blitzes you've heard about, in the past. The Block Island blitzes in the '80s, the Outer Cape Cod blitzes in the early '80s, late '70s, like that bite. Like, I don't know if there was anything that can compare to that.
Yeah, it was. I think it was the new moon of August 2017 specifically, and man, that I don't think you can get much. If there's better striper fishing, I can't imagine how it could be better.
It was. I remember we had to do a shoot on catching bonito. We went out, and I was less than happy to be out bonito fishing while it was going crazy at the canal all day. But I remember I fished the canal right up until I had to go on the boat for the bonito, got off the boat, booked it back to the canal. And it's like you didn't miss it. You step right back into your first cast, you're into the fish again. And that was all on mackerel. And the bass just had the bait in there and they wouldn't leave. That's one thing about the canal. People call it the fish funnel, because you do have the wider Cape Cod Bay, wider Buzzards Bay. And it just, the fish funnel right through. And same way that the fishermen have easier access to the stripers there from shore because they're going through this narrower passage. Same thing for the stripers and the bait fish. The mackerel or the herring or the bunker get trapped in there. And, it just creates a really easy feeding situation for stripers.
Yeah, that easy feeding situation and easy access combined, definitely, it becomes the ultimate magnet for fish and fishermen. It's so low entry to be able to start fishing the canal. All you got to do is there's ample parking access. So all you got to do is basically just hop out of your car, get on the bike trail, and start casting on the right day, that is.
Yeah, it hits all the points of a good shore fishing spot. It's got easy access up and down it. The fish are regularly feeding within casting range.
It really is something to be treasured. Like every time I go fish the canal and I park my car, I'm always shocked at how easy it is to park at the canal. So it's definitely worth taking care of that, not littering, being considerate of the environment you're in, because that parking access is so ample right now, and it would be a shame if something happened to it ultimately. So we really got to take care of those spots, man.
That's true. With all the attention that the canal gets, all these people that are fishing it, it can certainly create some friction with, there's houses, there's, residential areas that line the canal. A lot of them are close by to the places where you can park. And if fishermen are there leaving a lot of garbage, making a lot of noise, if I lived somewhere near that, something like that was happening, I would certainly try to rally to, I've already seen since 2008 living here, you've seen no parking signs or limited parking signs pop up places where they say no parking between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m., which is when you'd want to be at the canal. You see these signs popping up all over the place just because residents had it. They had it with people slamming doors and shouting and cursing and leaving trash. So, you really want to keep that in mind. It's not, fishing the canal is not a given. All that access to the canal isn't a given. And, you can see when the fishing's really good, even with all the parking areas along there, it still can be tough to find a spot. Like, so I've seen people parking along the sides of the road, along the sides of the highway there, just trying to get into the good part of the canal.
So just as those spots fill up, those parking spots, so do the spots along the bank of the canal. All those lines flying, all those plugs flying, line management and being careful is key to, avoiding those tangles and fishing comfortably in that lineup. Because when you're in that lineup and you're with the right group of guys or guys that you just say good morning to or just acknowledge somehow, it's pretty easy going, like it's remarkable how well the lineup can work when everyone's in on it.
Yeah, it's true. You're moving, you're fishing an area where there's a lot of current and you have to get into the casting rotation. If you want to be able to fish comfortably, not cross lines, not tick off the guy who's fishing next to you, you just go by the guy who's furthest down current, casts first, followed by the guy just up current of him, and so on. And then, by the time that guy comes in, he's ready to cast again. The guy at the end of the lineup who cast last is just retrieving. So it's just this rotation where if everybody's on the same page, it works beautifully. All it takes is one person, though, to get a little overexcited, cast out a turn. Maybe they see a fish break, and it all breaks down. You kind of get everyone goes, well, hell, if he's going to throw, well, I'm going to throw with that fish. And and that's, next thing you know, somebody's jabbing pliers at you.
It's very simple too. Like if I'm fishing in a lineup with guys who I'm not familiar with, I very blatantly will open my bail and just leave the rod at the ready and kind of wait on them to cast, and then it almost becomes second nature. You just do something to acknowledge the person down current of you. Is basically the easiest way to avoid any hassle.
Yeah, and back in the day, guys would say, if you got within a light pole of me, because all the canal, all the poles are numbered. That's how you kind of register the spots. And then every 5 poles, there's a light. So if you were within 1 light of somebody, you were too close. But today, it's just so crowded. That's not reality. You know what I mean?
That'd be a luxury.
Yeah. That much space I dream of that much space now. But now you're much closer together. So it's really important that everybody works together. And also, I don't understand the guys that are there and they're ready for a fight. I was there. So that Saturday before it all popped off, just 2 weeks ago, I was with a friend of mine who was visiting his family in Rhode Island. He's from Colorado and never fished the canal before, wanted to check it out. It's a Saturday morning. It's not the day that all the hardcore guys are out. It's everybody who works a 9 to 5 is going to be there. And this guy's he's trying to figure it out. He crossed the line of the guy up current of him, which happens. Everybody, no matter what your experience level is, eventually you're going to cross lines with somebody. This guy flipped out. He goes, whoa, it's $100. I'm throwing $100 plug. And I'm going to let alone the fact about why are you throwing $100 plug in the canal? I mean, that in itself. But two, it's a Saturday morning, buddy. Let's calm down. There weren't even fish.
Why doesn't everyone just relax?
All right, just let's relax.
Let's just fish.
I mean, if it was a Tuesday and nobody was there, and I could getting miffed then. But it's a Saturday. You have to go there on a weekend during the new moon and expect to have other fishermen there. I thought it was a complete overreaction. So that I don't get. But still, you want to minimize the amount of you want to minimize the odds of crossing somebody's line there.
Right. And one of the things that I do when it's really crowded is when I'm casting, I don't do anything but move the rod directly overhead, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and that is my cast. That ensures that wherever I point that rod tip, that is where the plug is going to land.
You do have you have a window. You said 10 and 2. That's probably about right. That is if a fish pops up within that little wedge of canal, that, you have a shot at that. But don't, if one pops up in front of the guy, and that's out of your little pizza slice there, don't do it. Okay, you're going to be tempted to cast to it.
Don't be that guy.
Don't do it.
Someone else's fish. But I even meant on the cast. I mean, directly just pointing the rod at 10 o'clock behind me and 2 o'clock forward too. So 2 rules for 10 and 2 there.
Yeah. So a guy who does some writing for us, been fishing the canal for a very long time, a wealth of knowledge. Carl Johansson has wrote about what canal fishing was like, back in I want to say he wrote about maybe the 60s and early 70s. And he said back then it was all about waiting to cast a breaking fish. And he said, if everybody, guys were real strict then about, whether a fish was your fish to cast at. And if you cast out a turn or casted a fish that was in front of somebody else, you'd get your line cut. And it sounded like it was, guys were a little bit more cutthroat back then in the canal, even though it wasn't very crowded. But back then, canal fishing was a lot different than it was today, just in terms of the lures they were using. You had your top waters, you had eel skin jigs, and a lot of guys would bounce bait. Bouncing sea worms was one of the most popular tactics back then. And today, part of, I think, another reason that the canal has gotten so crowded is that it has become easier to catch fish in the canal. And that's because of the tackle, advances in the tackle. I think things like the SP minnow, things like the magic swimmer, things like paddle tail swim baits. They have kind of, I don't mean this in a negative way, but they've dumbed it down a little bit. Whereas, guys back when you had to rely on making an eel skin jig and then presenting that in the right way, that would weed out a lot of your average fisherman who, one, wouldn't know how to properly make an eel skin jig, and two, wouldn't know how to work it right. Yeah,
that's another big key surviving the canal, then and now too, is fish what other people around you are fishing. If it's you're on those breaking tides and everyone is throwing like long distance casting pencils, you might not want to throw out a 5-ounce bucktail and start jigging. You kind of want to match what everyone else is doing. And there are days on the canal where you're letting your jig bounce way down current, and then even on the retreat back, that's when you're getting bites. And I've seen days where everyone is ultimately hooking up with their lines, almost running parallel to shore, but it all works because everyone's on the same page. Everyone's line is kind of in front of each other, but everything's equal.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, that's a great point that goes along with the fishing in the rotation, making sure you're casting when it's your turn. Going with the flow crowd-wise. If you want to throw something different and you're in tight quarters, then go somewhere else. If everybody's, like you said, throwing pencil poppers and you want to jig, you can make it work, but you're still going to have to work around them. It's not going to be up to the other guys who were throwing the pencils before you decided, I think I'm going to catch them on the jig. You have to want to work around the guy who was there first, what the guys who were there were doing first. That's common courtesy.
Big rule of thumb: just don't be that guy. Oh, I have a great that guy story. So it was 2017, and this was probably my third trip to the canal ever. I was, in a lineup of guys. Being a beach fisherman, I had waders, so I was sort of in the water, just a little bit. Another rule: get good footwear. You don't want to be walking around in deck boots. You definitely want to get good studded soles for your own safety. It's awesome. Having studded footwear on the canal is game changing. But anyway, so we're all kind of slightly in the water, slightly waiting, and then someone arrives in a wetsuit and swims to a rock.
In the canal.
Couple alarmingly far out. I'm not sure if he quite swam past water that was over his head, but he was dead set on getting to a particular perch in the canal. And it drove people insane. Because ultimately, when you're fishing the canal, you're guiding whatever you're fishing down the tide. And so since he was standing up on this rock, so
nobody up current of him can fish.
Yeah. So it pretty much, and on top of it, he was also throwing a jig. So he was standing on a rock with his line way down current and just pumping the rock. Anyway.
He ignored all the jeers, all the people yelling at him. He let that roll off his back and continued to fish.
He was there a while. I don't think he stayed all day, but he was taking his time.
It's a brave man.
Braver than I.
Yeah, doing that, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go out and cut off other people's fishing. I mean, it's one thing. If he was the first guy there and there wasn't a lineup of guys he was literally cutting off, that's one thing. It's first person there, you can pretty much do what you want, But if to go ahead and do that in a big crowd is kind of ridiculous. Same goes for casting from the service road. That is another one where, certain places, if everybody's on board, everybody's throwing from the service road, that's fine. But if there's guys on the rocks below you and you decide you want to launch one from up top, maybe go somewhere where there's not guys below you. I've been reviving fish, and I've had pencils whizzing over the top of my head from guys casting up on the road because they saw guys catching fish. Oh yeah,
that is a good rule though. When you're fishing from the service road at high tide, sometimes it can work, but definitely I do this every time because it also helps my casting distances. I check what the plug is doing immediately behind me. A lot of the times to get the most distance I possibly can, I'll actually touch the plug on whatever's behind me to stop the plug from rotating back and forth, because that's totally still pencil popper will actually go farther than a pencil that is slightly spinning on your line. So every time before I cast, if it's a top water plug, I stop that plug, I put it on the ground or rock or whatever's behind me just for a second, stop it moving, and then launch. And please do that if you're fishing on the service road. Look behind you, because all it's going to take is one guy ripping a cast into some poor cyclist, and that'll be that.
Also, the cyclists they can be jerks too. So they're not innocent. I have to hear
that's a discussion for another day.
I mean, what are you doing out there at 4 a.m. going 30 miles an hour on your e-bike? Just let me like slowly plod along to my spot without screaming on your left at me, scaring the shit out of me. Also, it's worth looking behind you so you don't hook anything, because once I hooked my bike and shattered my rod into a million pieces. So
look behind you.
And using appropriate gear is that's something that a lot of guys are on board with now. There's over the past 6-7 years, like the price of suitable canal gear has really come down a little bit. It's not a big investment to get a rod and reel that will cast far enough, handle the big enough lures, and be able to put the heat on good sized fish in the canal. It's not as expensive as it once was. You don't need a Shimano Stella. You just need a reel that's got relatively good guts. It's relatively strong.
2 good bets for reels specifically. The Penn Spinfisher 6 long cast, the 6500 size, that is a perfect canal reel for casting. Got the long cast spool on there, good pen durability, and then a great jigging reel. And on top of that, that reel is not that expensive. It's affordable, it's durable, great reel, great for plugging. And then specifically the Saragossa, there's a 14,000 size that there's a higher speed version of it that has 53 inches of retrieve per crank. And that's your jigging reel right there. And both of those reels are pretty affordable, and they're going to last a long time, and they're going to be able to horse those fish in.
Yeah, because if you go to the canal and you're using the same stuff you're using for throwing on a sand beach, and you hook into a good fish, you are going, and it's a crowded day, that fish is going to get you way down current. It's going to take you forever to land it. I've been below guys who are using gear that's way too light, and it shuts down everybody. It shuts down guys for 100 feet, 150 feet beyond him while you're sitting there waiting for him to land this fish, and it takes forever. And it's brutal. It's because you don't want to cast over the guy's fish. I mean, that's rule number 1 is don't cast over the line of a guy who's fighting a fish. Most guys, when they're fighting fish, will let you know. If there's a guy up current of you, and he's got a fish and he knows he's got a beat, he'll tell you, you're good, cast away, throw away, make your cast. But if you haven't gotten that go ahead, don't throw. But by the same token, use gear that's going to beat that fish in a reasonable amount of time. If you're hooked into a really big fish and you've got the right gear, that's one thing. Battle your fish, land your fish, do whatever you have to do. But if you're using gear that's way too light, and each one is just taking it way down current, and it's shutting everybody off, eventually.
It makes a lot more sense for you as the angler to use the heavier right gear, because you can catch some seriously large fish in the canal. So if you're lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time, and there are really large fish around, and a 20-pounder comes up and eats your plug, you don't want to be dealing with that fish for 10 plus minutes. You want to be able to get that fish in, get him out, and get fishing again.
And if you have somebody doing that, sometimes just a conversation with them, just being like, hey man, you fish here a lot before, you might for your next trip down here, might want to look at getting a little bit heavier setup. A lot of guys jump to the angry yelling part first. And a lot of times when somebody's doing something like that, they don't know that they're doing something wrong. They don't know that. I mean, the guy who swam out to the rock in the wetsuit probably knew he was doing something that people weren't going to like. But for the most part, it's a mistake. Like my buddy who crossed the line to the guy who's throwing the $100 lure, he didn't realize it. He didn't do it on purpose. He didn't know how far down current this guy's plug was. It was a mistake. So, don't assume the worst. Have a conversation with the guy before you go and pull your. Just
show them the gear you're using. Be friendly. Have a conversation. That's going to go a much longer way with the person than some quick retort.
Yeah, Andrew. So what's the etiquette on? Let's say you're in a moderate sized crowd. It's not super packed together. The fish have showed up. You've got some buddies at the other end of the canal who aren't doing anything. Is it okay to call them in? It's tough because you'd want them to call you in. Don't say for a second you would be like, no, don't call me if it's
okay. There's two factors here. If a bunch of my buddies are down at the opposite end and they know I'm by my lonesome, number one, I would like to be included, and number two, if I knew someone with just a single angler that I knew was down a ways, I would invite them. Because, if I know the person, if you're friendly with the person, you really know them, you can fish shoulder to shoulder as long as you're coordinated. So bringing one person in, I think that's okay. But bringing a whole squadron of new anglers in, that's where I kind of draw the line.
So one person's okay. But I'll tell you this. I have been next to guys who've gotten that call, and I see like, pick up the phone and go, Then all of a sudden they shut down, scurry up to their bike. And what Jim does is he scurries right up to his bike too. Like I'm not proud. I will go. And I mean, sometimes I think the guy think we just got a call he had to be home. I followed the guys to the parking lot by accident. So got an angry call from his wife. Here I thought he was chasing down fish. But that's the guys are going to notice. The guys are going to see people heading in one direction. It's going to draw a crowd. It's tough. Because I definitely want that. If you're ever out there, Andrew, always call me. You can always call. Don't worry, and I'll do the same for you.
Of course.
But it's. I don't know. I usually, if I see other people doing it, I'm like, well, you know what? The toothpaste is out of the tube. I'm going to call all my buddies in too. If these other guys are doing it, I don't know. You have to feel it out. There's no one good answer for that. But I like yours. If it's just one guy, and you know him well enough, you can fish close together, and it's not going to really change the dynamic of where you're fishing. I think that's probably a good call. I mean, or even if canal fish count, that's something in recent years that I've been seeing a lot of on social media. That people kind of poo-poo the canal blitz fish, and I understand it, and I also I don't know. I'm not one to turn down some fun fishing. I mean, it's a lot of fun when you're at the canal and there's fish blowing up mackerel right at your feet and you're catching them every other cast. Like, that is a blast. It may not hold the same weight as somebody like going out on their secret, beach and catching one giant fish that they've worked to catch all season. But man, at the end of the day, fishing's about fun. So, and
the canal is a very fun place to fish.
Yeah.
I think people forget that sometimes, have fun. So that's just, a few tips and tricks for surviving the Cape Cod Canal. It's been a little bit of a lackluster year so far. This July was really hit or miss. The previous moon was great. This one, not so much, but August should hold some good stuff, or if not, then later in the fall run too. But this is definitely an opinionated topic, so we'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And thanks for watching, guys.